Today's episode of What's the Big Idea is brought to you by collaboration. Oh yeah, collaboration. When school communities, students, parents, teachers, administrators, local organizations work together, great things happen. Teachers, no one is an island. Reach out and get some free collaboration today. Pierce Murphy has our soundtrack covered again. Now on to the show.
Shadow of uncertain living, hang low and keep us in mind.
Welcome to today's episode of What's the Big Idea? I'm your host, Dan Carney. Later in the show, I'll be joined by a panel of 5 educators from Animas High School in Durango, Colorado. But I want to begin today's episode by reading a tweet. It comes from Robert Pondisio, a senior fellow at the conservative-leaning Fordham Institute. If you haven't checked out the Fordham Institute, it's worth taking a spin through their website of policy ideas and commentary about education reform. While I personally find myself rarely in full agreement with their ideas, they are undoubtedly an important voice in education. Back in March, Mr. Pondisio tweeted, "While I may have my issues with the SAT, nothing can be gamed easier than portfolios. Nothing." This tweet came in the wake of the Varsity Blues scandal. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you are well versed in this story, so here's just a very brief summary. An FBI investigation into one white-collar crime uncovered another, a massive bribery operation in which wealthy parents went to extraordinary and expensive lengths to get their children into elite private colleges and universities. Some of the examples were almost comical, such as photoshopping teens' faces onto pictures of world-class athletes in often successful attempts to get a sports scholarship. The whole thing came crashing down for these parents, including some high-profile people in Hollywood and finance who are now facing jail time. The episode brought up some very uncomfortable questions about college admissions in a country already grappling with income inequality. One of those questions was about the SAT and ACT tests. Part of the scandal involved parents paying for their children to get higher SAT scores, either by having someone else take the exam for them, or paying a doctor to diagnose their child with a quote-unquote learning disability, thus allowing them to have extra time for the test. Questions have been raised, questions that have been out there for a while, such as, is the SAT really a fair and equitable way to judge who will succeed in college? Does it deserve its status as a gatekeeper? For a long time, there's been a propensity of data showing that wealthier children perform better on SAT and ACT tests, often because they can afford high-priced tutors. A little side note here, I recently had a conversation with someone who runs a high-priced elite SAT tutoring company. This person made it very clear that what tutoring sessions have is nothing to do with learning, but rather tricks to beat the test. This person called it a version of legal cheating. So the conversation comes around to other ways for students to demonstrate why they are a good fit for a college or university. And a lot of conversation lands on portfolios, or more commonly today, digital portfolios. Let's stop here for a second to define what we mean by digital portfolio. You probably have some idea in your head of what I'm talking about. Broadly speaking, it's a digital platform in which students can post work they've completed, work in progress, and reflection on that work. And the portfolio would span over many years and many subjects. The portfolio could also include outside of school activities that demonstrate student passions or talents, such as in music or sports or service projects. The portfolio could be hosted on a free online site, such as Google Sites, Weebly, Wix. It could also be hosted on a digital site created by the school. Now let's go back to that tweet from Robert Pondisio at the Fordham Institute. His claim, and he is certainly not the only one making this claim, is that portfolios are too easy to game. In other words, children and their parents, especially those with resources, could create incredible and professional-looking portfolios that are not a true representation of that student, but rather something bordering on more of a brand. Now, on the face, this seems like a pretty accurate statement. I mean, it's already happening in some places. Parents of means are able to help their children develop incredible portfolios, especially in cases where the child might want to go to an arts high school. And they can start at a very young age and give that child a huge advantage. So, on the one hand, I do agree with Mr. Pondisio, but I mostly disagree with him. And part of this disagreement comes from what I see as a rather lazy, fatalistic argument in favor of the SAT and ACT exams. It's a lot of, well, it's not perfect, but it's the best thing we have. Indeed, there seems to be a lot of people in education who are sticking with the defense that the SAT is the lesser of a whole bunch of evils. I find that to be a deficit mentality, and I think we can do better. And I believe that digital portfolios are one tool that can help us do better. Portfolios, like any big picture, holistic piece of work, require a philosophical and practical-minded buy-in by the school and community. Simply telling students they need to make a portfolio or collect some work and put it into an organized system simply will not cut it. But where schools can build this mentality and belief from the ground up and make portfolios authentic pieces of the learning experience, they can find success. I'd like to offer a couple of examples. One I will speak briefly about and refer you to resources posted on our Twitter feed. The schools of Madison, Alabama have put together a robust program of digital portfolios. Not only have they done that, but they've created an amazing set of resources for teachers and schools around the world. This is truly one of the best and most organized resources I've ever seen as a teacher. They created a Google Drive folder that has a step-by-step process for rolling out a successful digital portfolio program at any school. What I find most impressive about it is that at the beginning of this process is all about the why. It's all about helping students see the purpose of these portfolios. Long before they get into the what and the digital platform and the nuts and bolts, students and staff are asked to examine the big picture purpose of these portfolios. My other example comes from Animas High School in Durango, Colorado. A bit about this school. At 10 years old, it is still a very young high school and one that was created as a response to community need. Based largely on the work being done by High Tech High in San Diego, Animas is a project-based learning school. Digital portfolios, or DPs as they are commonly referred to at the school, are an integral part of both the school's philosophy and practice. Not only do all students maintain a DP throughout their Animas career, but all teachers do as well. Now might be a great time to pause the podcast and head over to animashighschool.com/digital-portfolios, or simply Google Animas Digital Portfolios, and Animas is spelled ANIMAS. Spend a few minutes browsing the DPs to give you a bit more context for my conversation. Recently, I had the pleasure of speaking with 5 educators from Animas. I was joined on the call by 2 administrators, Jessica Adams, the Director of College Counseling, and Libby Coles, the Assistant Head of School, and 3 teachers, Roxy McKnight from the Arts Department, and Sarah Price and Jessica McCollum from Humanities. I began by asking them how digital portfolios fit into the learning vibe at Animas. The first word I got back was curate, a word, Jessica McCollum told me, that gets thrown around a lot at the school.
Because it's one thing to finish a unit at a regular high school, at a typical high school, and just move on to the next thing and put that unit away in the filing cabinet. And that work matters less because it's over, it's done, it doesn't have posterity, it doesn't have this real-world audience. So when we take 3 days to have kids write a reflection, update their DP, curate it, they realize the gravity of like how much it matters to make their work beautiful at the end of the day. And that's one of the values of our school is just refinement, but also beautiful work. Just the work should matter and it should always have an audience. And so I think that it's worth the trade-off. Yes, we lose time, we teach less content, but it's worth it to us in the bigger scheme of the type of thinker and citizen that we're creating, I think.
Well, and I would argue it's not that we lose content, we teach different content.
Yeah,
right. We value that as content.
depth over, that is content, right? I actually have a little bit of an issue with the way that the educational world calls things soft skills, because to me, those aren't soft skills. At the end of the day, reflection is possibly a more important human quality than like how to calculate a formula or whatever else it is that we are pushing into the curriculum in a more breadth over depth model. I would rather have a society full of reflective human beings than human beings that know more formulas, if that makes sense.
Especially in a 21st century reality, right, where kids, grow up with computers in their hands and can access information and that kind of content, right? Skills become more important.
It became clear during our conversation that Animus is all about depth over breadth, a reference to the idea that learning less subject-specific content, but in a deeper fashion, helps students develop the sort of transdisciplinary skills that will best prepare them for college and career. They explained this philosophy in greater depth when I asked a question that had lingered with me from the first time I looked at the DPs. How do students find the time to create quality portfolios?
We build it in, yeah.
Well, I think that starts with like the very first seminar they do at our school, which is on the text called Beautiful Work. And so because we're a depth over breadth school, we prefer to go slow to go fast, as Roxy says often, right? And so if we're going to make beautiful work, we have to pause. We have to allow for critique, peer critique, and teacher critique, and give them the space and time for it and see it as important. It's not just, okay, if we can squeeze this in, it's just as important. Like the reflection, like when I teach a project, I can say the essay should be the most graded, most important piece, right? But that's not true. Actually, the reflection is equally as important in my class, right? And so the DP is seen the same way. If we have them, because we have them do a lot of work for the digital portfolio, we have them, take pictures of the work and make sure that we use Roxy's light box so that it's framed beautifully, right? And then maybe that takes twice as long as snapping a shot, but that's part of beautiful work. Mm-hmm. And then we make sure that they have formatted their essay so that it fits on the DP. And I even make these little pictures, right? It's like, here, put the image here, the text here, the title here, the description here, right? And I give them that so that they have a structure that is aesthetically beautiful. And I think just giving them class time, like sometimes saying this is worth the class time.
Which is not always easy, right?
No.
I mean, we certainly have spirited conversations among the faculty about that balance between delivering content that you want to cover and making time for this skill development. Right, that is a real tension, and it's one that we're, I think, pretty much always talking about, trying to figure out.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the principles. 10 years ago, someone honestly looked at my portfolio, saw that I could teach digital art, knew I was fluent in Adobe, but my only responsibility was teach these kids how to build portfolios. And so from the very beginning, they get support in how to build them, and they get choice. They get to, they can choose any platform they want. I do discourage the Google sites because of the lack of ownership and because of the lack of design possibilities. And so, some come in knowing that, and they're given a choice. Like, choose a platform, build your website, you own it, and you can go from there. But they have the support, and we found out just a few years ago through some research that I did for my master's, was that our new students needed more support. Our new transfer students, kids that came in that didn't take digital art with me as a freshman. And so we created a class just for that need to help give them that support. And so my first period every day is helping transfer students build these portfolios, become familiar with Adobe rhetoric, just trying to figure out that whole design, social media, marketing side of things, because, you can't even go to the local supermarket anymore and request like financial support for a project. You have to do everything digital, and it's great for them. And so they get that support when they're younger. There's always room for refinement. We were kind of talking about that earlier today, that we've been doing this for 10 more years, but I this is like my baby, right? This is why I got hired, and I'd love to see an overhaul, revamp, hashtag refinement process that the teachers adapt and that the students are then able to kind of follow suit with. And I'm lucky to work at a school where that's actually possible.
Yeah, I'll just jump on that. I mean, we are definitely an educational community that is constantly reevaluating what we do and how we do it, and seeking refinement in what we do. And so while it's really flattering that you found us and you think our digital portfolios look great, internally our conversations tend more toward how can we do this better? What do we need to do to switch up how we're supporting student learning? What do we need to do to support teachers so that they can find and make the space for digital portfolio upkeep? What skills do our teachers need, et cetera, et cetera?
You can hear the passion these educators have for the DPs and efforts involved in helping students see the value and importance of creating quality work. A lot of that work I found during my self-guided tour through the portfolios is centered around students' lives outside of school. Personal passion and skills really shine through in the DPs. Here's an example. A current senior wrote this reflection about volunteering with a local nonprofit. I ran competitive track and cross country all through middle school. The summer between my 8th and 9th grade year, I attended an extremely aggressive running camp. During the time at the camp, I realized I had lost my genuine love for running. I only cared about trying to win. When I started to become a runner, I was so proud even if I was not the fastest kid. After the camp, I felt terrible and realized competitive running was not for me at this point in my life. I decided to become a Girls on the Run running buddy that year. This was the best thing I had ever done in my running career. I fell in love with running again. Okay, I can hear some of you saying, yeah, but what about college? What about the students going beyond Animas? Do these portfolios really help? I asked the group for examples that they'd seen of the DPs impacting life beyond high school. Sarah and Roxy weighed in.
We had a young lady a few years back who she ended up going to Africa for her junior year and coming back and didn't do as well on standardized tests, but really wanted to get into Lewis and Clark, which is a pretty good school. And she ended up getting in because of her digital portfolio and not because, so even though her tests weren't up to standard, they use that in lieu of because they are moving more towards a system of that. And so that's the reason she got in, was because of, and she should have, because she was a brilliant young woman who didn't test well. So that's one example I thought of.
So a second example for an outside of school situation, I had a student that had her digital portfolio, and she came to me one day and was like, I want to apply to be a photojournalist on this volunteer exchange program in the summer, next summer. And they want me to send an email with 20 attachments. Is that even possible? And how can we make that look better? And I was like, well, yeah, we're going to do that because that's what they're asking. I was like, but in the first paragraph that you address them in your email, you are going to link a website. And we're going to build a website, basically everything they're asking and requiring for you to send as an attachment, which I don't know why anyone would want to download 20 attachments and then open all those, right? That's time consuming. And so their ask was archaic in a way. And so what we did was we built her a website that fit the requirements of the project application. Why should we pick you to be a photojournalist? And she was like, here's not only everything you asked for, but I can also organize it. And does your organization have a website? And could I help you archive years past and years future? And she blew them out of the water. She obviously got chosen. I don't know if that was the quality of the work that we sent in, or, I'm pretty sure that the fact that she submitted a website in addition to the email request, but it was built on the same principles as a student portfolio, and her website that she built included her student portfolio. There was a link to everything she'd done in school too. So like you said earlier, they really could get a full idea, a full picture of that human and kind of like who they were going to be expecting. It's almost like they knew her personality when she showed up.
Jessica Adams then spoke more broadly about the college admissions game and where DPs fit in. She also addressed one of my main questions. In light of the recent Varsity Blues scandal and the role of SATs, where do portfolios sit in the college admission debate?
So how I like to talk to families about that is if you think about being an admissions rep and having, say, and this would be a light load, but 5,000 applications that you're reading, and all of the students have great essays, and maybe the school is test optional, and so you're looking at 2,500 applications that maybe don't have test scores, but there's letters of recommendation and graded work, and say that is all kind of on par. They're really equal. How do you make a decision? And so I think the other pieces of evidence is how that pushes kind of that edge in that decision-making process, right? So if you are, because we're a project-based learning school, that's really an easy sell. We have an alumni at Bates College right now that built and raced a solar car. So when you are able to present that in a digital portfolio, that gives you a very different view than, and gives you kind of a leg up, right? You still need to be able to be academically qualified for the school. A digital portfolio is not going to make you academically qualified if you do not have an essay that is articulate and doesn't have grammatical errors. If you don't have the course rigor that is expected from that institution in the grades, but it's kind of like the afterpiece. I've not sat on the other side of the desk at a higher ed institution admissions rep, right? And so I'm sure there's things that go on behind the scenes that I'm not privy to or aware of. But you know, the reality is that they are really looking at a full and complete application. And that's varying dependent on the type of institution that a student's applying to and the amount of resources that institution has. So that's dependent on whether an admissions rep has 50,000 applications, and that maybe is an exaggeration, but a large amount of applications that they're weeding through, and so they're probably not going to be able to literally have the human capacity to read through additional documents like, say, a digital portfolio, potentially even an essay, right, or letters of recommendation. And then you have institutions that have more money and resources so that those admissions counselors can come through, even, say, transcripts to see the difference between did a student take a more rigorous curriculum than another student. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all. I've had students that have been denied from institutions that have really great SAT and ACT scores. And my assumption and belief system is that, you know, my students are the ones that are taking those exams and that those are accurate test scores, but that alone is not going to get a student into a highly selective institution. And it's the same thing with the digital portfolio. And, you know, I'm probably going to be really honest here in the sense of, like, whenever you have a system in place in a society, there is always a way to manipulate a system. And there are few individuals in our society that try and manipulate that system, but that doesn't mean necessarily that the system's bad, right? So having a digital portfolio, I think the reason why it's so key in a college application process is because it gives that edge and another look into what a student is really doing. Because it's hard to describe the in-depth analysis of a project or reflection or growth from building a motor to building an entire solar car unless you're capable of seeing that in a digital form. And colleges are jumping on with that, right? Like, you have platforms like Zeme and Slate that are allowing digital portfolios to be uploaded.
Right.
And so it's a movement, right? But I don't think you can do an either or.
As we wrapped up our discussion, I asked these educators what advice would they give teachers and schools who were thinking about taking on digital portfolios.
Yeah, it won't work if it's just you create a website and you throw stuff on it and that's it. No one ever goes back and refines it or uses it or sends it out.
I guess I would say, like, for me, it's just as important to showcase where they came from. So often we're asking them to say, here was my first draft, here was my last. So making sure that, part of the intentionality is to show growth, then show the growth.
Right. Don't be afraid to only show the most refined end product.
I think also getting creative as a staff and then incorporating students on how these digital portfolios can be used. So if students feel like it is one more thing that they're being required to do, then it's not going to be done well and you're going to have an uphill battle. But if you can collectively figure out how this can help them both in their current role and then what their potential future role in life could look like, then you're going to be able to create that buy-in that they are going to want to be able to utilize them and work with them.
I would also say practice what you preach, especially if you're working with teenagers. Teenagers, as we all know, can sniff out phony better than anyone. Think about Holden Caulfield and why is he such a figure in American literature for teen readers, right? If we are not practicing what we preach, if we are not being authentic in modeling for them professional behavior, then we cannot ask them to do the same.
Yeah, so to add to that, just to reiterate, if students are doing it, teachers must. Hands down, definite advice. And secondly, the reflections. Add the reflections. Take the time to have them write reflections that go along with the work. Don't just let it be a repository of work. Ask them to get reflective about the work and add that to the digital portfolio, because I think in the long run, looking back on that, really is a testament to the people and students that they are and are becoming.
And educators we have such full plates already. Sometimes you might listen to this podcast and be like, is that one more thing that I have to do? Like, forget it. But the reality is that the implementation, I think all of us sitting around this table would say, has made our jobs more efficient, streamlined, and easier. Just not having the amount of parent and student emails asking me when I'm available has just saved tons of time by that one button on my homepage.
Go to my DP, go to my DP, go to my DP. Teachers, you know what it's like to have the kid that was absent for a week come and ask you for a week's worth of work. Go to my DP is all you need to say. It's wonderful.
Well, and then just figure out how to teach from it. I make a Google slide. I embed my Google slide on my DP. And I teach that same Google slide, so I did nothing except copy and paste. I never write a thing on the board anymore. I teach through the DP. It's so easy.
You heard them talking about go to my DP, go to my DP. And this is in reference to another theme we discussed, which I have not included here for time purposes. I encourage you to look closely at the teacher portfolios at Animas, because not only have they used them as professional showcases of their work and philosophy, they've also turned them into workflow tools. Daily classwork, Google Slides, handouts, resources, all of this is located on their DPs. As one of them stated, I teach from my DP. So they have found a daily practical use for the portfolio that streamlines their teaching day and improves student learning. And that wraps up this episode. A huge thanks to the educators from Animas High School for giving their perspective and giving me, personally, a lot to think about. I hope you enjoyed. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic. Leave us comments and questions on our Twitter feed, @BigIdeaEd. I leave you now with Roxy McKnight reading a letter written to the teachers of Animas by the Student Council. Thanks for checking out What's the Big Idea?
So it says, Dear AHS teachers and staff, we wanted to let you all know how much we appreciate the time and effort you put into keeping your online digital portfolios up to date. We realize this is a great privilege that we receive as students at Animas. as it provides us with stress-free convenience when occasionally missing a day. Many of us, additionally, use your digital portfolios to plan ahead and or review activities from days before. Your digital portfolios continue to set us up for success as students. For example, Steve's ability to plan ahead has relieved the junior class of much of the well-known stress that may come with chemistry. Lori's impeccable attention to detail for both the sophomores and seniors is greatly, all caps, appreciated. Susie, Kat, and Sarah keep those awesome slideshows coming. And for all you that have calendars, we love them. Also, thanks to Tori for all the organization and providing links. Those are only a few examples, as it is clear our school is filled with teachers going the extra mile. Please know that your hard work does not go unnoticed, and you have given us great opportunity to thrive as AHS Ospreys. Sincerely, Student Council on behalf of the students.
Shadow of uncertain living, hang low and keep us in mind. And though nature ain't forgiving, that doesn't mean she isn't kind.